When you've been sleeping in your car long enough, every sound starts to feel like a memory you forgot. The wind through the trees sounds like running water. A bird on the hood becomes a clock. But that morning, I woke to something else, silence. The engine had finally given up, somewhere on a dirt road that didn't even show up on the map. My son, Ethan, was still asleep in the passenger's seat, his face half buried in a blanket. I stepped outside, stretched my legs, and looked around. That's when I saw it. A farmhouse in the distance, half eaten by weeds. It stood crooked against the horizon, its roof caving slightly, windows dark and broken. Fences had fallen in places, and the field around it was nothing but brown weeds and thistles. I remember thinking how even decay can look peaceful from far away. "Dad?" Ethan's voice was groggy. "Where are we?" "Nowhere yet," I said, "but maybe somewhere soon." He followed my gaze to the house. "You think anyone lives there?" I shook my head. "Doesn't look like it." He smiled a little. "Then maybe it's ours." I laughed, but inside, I hoped he might be right. We walked toward it, the grass thick and wet against our jeans. The closer we got, the more I could see how bad it was. Paint peeling, porch sagging, one shutter hanging by a single nail. The door was unlocked. It groaned when I pushed it open. Inside, the air smelled like dust and rain. There was an old stove in the corner, a few chairs, and a table missing one leg. A family must have left in a hurry decades ago. Ethan ran his fingers along the wall, leaving trails in the dust. "Dad," he whispered, "it's quiet." Pressed, "Oh, what a dough." "Yeah," I said softly. "Too quiet." We set up our sleeping bags on the floor that first night. The roof leaked in 2 places, so I dragged an old bucket under one of the drips. Ethan lay there staring up at the ceiling, his eyes reflecting the faint light from the window. "You think we can stay here for a while?" I hesitated. "Until someone tells us not to." He nodded, satisfied. I couldn't tell him the truth, that I didn't know how long a while could be. But something about that place felt different, like it wasn't asking us to leave, like it had been waiting. The next morning, I explored the property. Behind the house, past a rusted tractor, stretched what used to be a field fenced in, wild now, overrun by weeds as tall as my chest. In the corner stood a barn leaning at a dangerous angle. I pushed open the door carefully. Dust exploded into the air. Inside were forgotten tools, a cracked mirror, and dozens of glass jars, all empty. When I came back out, Ethan was sitting on the porch with a stick, drawing lines in the dirt. "You know," he said, "we could plant something." I almost laughed. "Like what?" He shrugged. "Hope." It sounded childish, but the word stuck with me. Hope. I hadn't thought about growing anything in years. Survival doesn't leave much room for seeds. But there was something in the air here. Space, silence, possibility. That afternoon, we cleaned the kitchen, swept the floors, and patched one broken window with cardboard. I found a faded calendar on the wall from 1993. "Dad," Ethan said, pointing at it, "that's the year you were my age." "Guess this place is frozen in time," I said. He smiled. "Then let's wake it up." A few days later, we drove into the nearest town. It wasn't much, one grocery store, a gas station, and a feed shop. I bought a small bag of potatoes and a few packets of seeds. The cashier, an older woman with a kind face, looked at me curiously. "Starting a garden?" "Trying to," I said. "Ground's tough this time of year," she warned. "Takes patience." "Good thing we've got time," I replied. She smiled and added 2 extra seed packets to the bag. "On the house," she said. That was the first kindness we'd been shown in months. Back at the farmhouse, we started clearing the field. It was harder than I expected, the soil dry and stubborn, roots twisted like wire. We worked for hours, sweating, laughing, sometimes swearing when the shovel hit a rock. "Dad," Ethan said, breathing hard, "why do you think nobody came back for this place?" I looked at the field, the house, the broken barn. "Maybe they lost too much to keep trying." He nodded, quiet for a moment. "Then we'll try for them." That's how it began. Two broke strangers planting borrowed seeds on someone else's forgotten land. The first week, nothing happened. The ground stayed brown and dry, the air thick with heat. Every morning we watered the soil with what little we had left in our jugs. Ethan kept checking it, like watching would make it grow. "You can't rush it," I told him. "I'm not," he said. "I'm just making sure it knows we're waiting." It made me smile. The kid had patience I never did. Sometimes I think hope grows best in the hearts of children, because they believe first, and that belief is contagious. We slept lighter those nights. Coyotes howled in the distance, and the wind rattled the loose siding. Still, the house felt safer than the car ever did. It creaked, but it held. One morning, Ethan ran in yelling, "Dad, it's green!" I rushed outside, half expecting a dream. But he was right. Tiny shoots had pushed through the dirt, fragile but alive. "Looks like they heard you," I said. He grinned. "Told you they would." I knelt beside him, my hands sinking into the soil. For the first time in years, I felt grounded, literally. Maybe we were growing, too. Weeks passed. The garden became our routine wake at sunrise, work until our shadows grew short. I repaired the fence while Ethan watered the plants with a makeshift can from an old paint bucket. The air smelled different now, like life. One afternoon, a pickup truck pulled up. A man leaned out, hat low, gray beard, framing a weathered smile. "Didn't think anyone was living here again," he said. "Guess we are," I replied. He nodded toward the field. "Looks good. This place used to feed half the county." I looked at the weeds beyond our little patch. Maybe it will again. His name was Tom. He lived down the road and offered to bring over his old tiller. "You'll need it if you're serious," he said. When he came back the next day, he stayed for coffee and stories. He told us about the farmer who once owned this land, a man named Charles Hayes. "Hard-working fellow," Tom said. "Lost his wife young, kept farming anyway, until the droughts took it all. He left one night and never came back." I looked out at the field. "Guess we're giving it another chance." "I was not a call his ditties for," Tom smiled. "Then you're doing right by him." The garden grew faster than we expected, rows of potatoes, carrots, and beans, each sprouting with quiet defiance. Ethan named every section: Hope Row, Faith Patch, Miracle Corner. I teased him for it, but deep down, I loved it. Naming things makes them real. One afternoon, I caught him drawing a map of the garden in his notebook. "What's this?" "In case someone else needs to grow here someday," he said. It stopped me cold. He wasn't just planting food, he was planting instructions for kindness. The kind that survives even after we're gone. The town started to notice. A few people would slow their cars, curious about the green field appearing where dead grass once stood. One morning, a woman stopped by. "You the folks fixing up the Hayes place?" "That's us," I said. She smiled. "It's nice to see it alive again. My granddad used to buy corn here." She left with a small bag of potatoes we'd dug up. The next day, she came back with a basket of bread. That's how it began, a quiet exchange that grew faster than the crops themselves. By midsummer, The field was a sea of green. Ethan would run through the rows barefoot, laughing, while I watched from the porch with a mug of weak coffee. Sometimes I thought about the people who'd once lived here, how they must have stood in the same spot, proud and tired, watching the wind move through the crops. We were strangers living another family's dream, but it didn't feel borrowed anymore. It felt earned, and in that feeling, I found peace I hadn't known in years. We started giving vegetables away, first to Tom, then to the lady from town, then to anyone who stopped by. "Don't you want to sell them?" Ethan asked. "Maybe later," I said. "For now, it's enough to share." He thought about it, then nodded. Mom would have liked that. He was right. She'd always believed that what little you have means more when you give it. The next morning, he painted a sign on a piece of old plywood. "Free vegetables, take what you need." And that's when everything really started to grow. People began leaving things in return: jars of jam, a loaf of bread, even tools. One man left a note. "Lost my job. These carrots helped my kids eat. Thank you." We pinned it to the kitchen wall. By the end of the month, the wall was covered with letters and photos from people we'd never met. It was strange. Our small patch of earth had turned into something bigger, a trait of kindness that didn't need keeping score. Every seed planted had grown roots deeper than we could see. That fall, the first frost came early. The plants wilted, but we'd harvested enough to fill every jar we could find. We stored them in the barn beans, potatoes, carrots, all lined up neatly on the shelves. Ethan looked at them proudly. "Think we'll make it through winter?" I smiled. I think we already did. Because for the first time in years, we had more than food. We had neighbors who cared, hands that helped, and land that forgave. We had hope, and this time, it wasn't just ours. That night, as the fire crackled in the old stove, I looked around the room: patched walls, mismatched chairs, the smell of earth still clinging to our clothes. Ethan was asleep at the table, a pencil still in his hand, a map of the garden under his head. Outside, the wind howled, but the house didn't flinch. It wasn't abandoned anymore. It was ours, built from nothing, fed by everything we had left. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like running. I felt like staying. If you'd told me 6 months ago that a homeless man and his son could turn an empty field into a home, I would have laughed. But now, I know better. Sometimes you don't find home. Sometimes you build it seed by seed, kindness by kindness. The house at the end of the field may never be perfect, but it's alive, and so are we. And maybe that's what home really means. A place that grows with you, forgives your past, and waits for you to start again. By the time the second spring came, the garden had outgrown us. What started as a patch behind the house now stretched almost to the fence line, green and alive. I used to count the rows every morning: 8, then 12, then too many to keep track. Ethan said we should give it a name. "Every place that matters has one," he said. We wrote Hopefield on a scrap of wood and nailed it to the gate. It sounded too grand for what we had, but somehow it fit. You don't name something after what it is, you name it after what it means. People from town started visiting more often. Some came to trade, some to work, some just to talk. The woman from the grocery store, Carol, brought us leftover bread every Friday. Tom showed up with a rusty truck full of compost and advice. Before long, Saturdays became garden days. Neighbors would pull weeds, plant rows, and stay for soup. Nobody planned it that way. It just happened. One afternoon, I looked around at all those people laughing and sweating under the sun and realized something I hadn't in years. We weren't surviving anymore. We were part of something living. Ethan thrived in it. He'd draw signs for every row: kindness, carrots, faith beans, patience peas. I told him it was silly, but I left them up. Kids from town started coming just to see them. One little girl pointed to a sign that said, "Courage Corn." "Why courage?" she asked. Ethan smiled. "Because it grows tallest." She nodded, like that made perfect sense. And it did. That's what this place had become, a field of small lessons growing right alongside the vegetables. The local paper caught wind of it. A reporter came by with a camera, asked a few questions, and took photos of Ethan holding a basket of potatoes. The headline the next week read, "Father and Son Grow Hope on Forgotten Land." It felt strange seeing our faces in print. For so long I'd been invisible. Now, strangers waved when we went into town. Some even called me the Garden Man. I didn't know if that was who I wanted to be, but it was better than the homeless guy from the car. Names matter, especially new ones. With attention came offers, some kind, some curious. A man in a suit came by one morning. He said he worked for the county. "You don't own this land," he explained politely. "Legally, it's still registered to the Hayes family estate." I felt the air go out of me. "So what happens now?" He sighed. "As long as no one files a claim, you're fine. But if they do..." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. That night, I sat on the porch staring at the dark field. For the first time since planting it, I was afraid to lose it. Ethan found me out there and sat down beside me. "Dad," he said softly, "if they take it, they can't take what it did." I didn't answer at first. He went on. "The garden already fed people. It already mattered. Even if we have to start somewhere else, it doesn't erase that. Sometimes kids say things adults forget to believe." He was right. What we built wasn't just dirt and seeds. It was proof that something broken could still give back. And that kind of soil grows anywhere. The next morning, I told the community what was happening. Tom leaned back in his chair and said, "Then let's make it harder for anyone to take it." He explained we could register it as a community garden. "It's not official ownership," he said, "but it's recognition. And sometimes recognition is all you need." The process took weeks, forms, signatures, meetings, but everyone helped. When the approval finally came, I held the letter in my hands and felt a weight lift. It didn't say mine. It said ours. And that was better. That summer was hot, so hot the ground cracked in places. We woke early to water the plants before the sun got cruel. Ethan rigged up a rain barrel system from old gutters, and Tom brought over spare hoses. People still came, even in the heat. Carol joked that we'd turn into a church without pews. Maybe she was right. Instead of sermons, we shared sweat. Instead of hymns, laughter. And the only prayer we ever said was, "Please, rain soon." One day, a stranger came walking down the road, a tall man with a backpack and a sunburned face. He asked if he could rest a while. Ethan handed him water, and I offered shade under the porch. He told us he'd been walking for weeks, heading nowhere in particular. When he saw the sign that said Hopefield, he figured it was a good place to stop. He stayed 2 days, helping fix a fence, then moved on. Before he left, he said, "This place reminds people they still have something to give." That's when I realized kindness travels farther than footprints. Harvest time came early that year. The field was heavy with colored tomatoes, bright as sunset, corn tall enough to hide in, beans curling like green ribbons. We threw a small harvest dinner. Everyone brought something: pies, bread, jars of honey. We ate under string lights strung between fence posts, the air thick with crickets and laughter. Ethan stood on a crate and said a few words. "Thanks for helping the land remember." It wasn't rehearsed. It didn't need to be. Those words said everything. Winter came with a warning: early frost, short days, hungry nights. We stored what we could, packed jars and bags for the neighbors who needed them most. Carol started calling it the winter pantry. Some nights we'd find notes at the door. Thank you for dinner. Even when the ground froze, kindness didn't. The fields slept under snow, but it wasn't dead, it was resting. So were we. For once, rest didn't mean surrender. It meant trust that spring would come, that hope doesn't vanish when it's cold. Around Christmas, the mayor invited us to town hall. Ethan wore the one shirt without paint stains. They presented us with a plaque, for building hope where none was left. He saw the down. I didn't know what to say, so I said the truth. We just grew food, I said. Everyone else grew the rest. The crowd laughed softly, but some wiped tears. That night, as we walked home through the snow, Ethan looked up at me and said, "Guess we're farmers now." I smiled. Guess we always were. We just didn't have soil before. When spring returned, the town showed up with seeds, hundreds of packets, all kinds. We built new raised beds, added a small greenhouse from salvaged windows. Ethan designed wooden signs for everything. Lettuce, squash, tomatoes, herbs. The smell of earth and sun filled the air again. It felt like we were breathing with the land. Every weed pulled, every seed planted it. All felt like a thank you note to the world for giving us another year. And for the first time, I stopped worrying about losing it. You can't lose something that belongs to everyone. One morning, a school bus stopped out front. A teacher stepped out with a group of kids holding notebooks. She asked if they could learn about gardening. I said yes, of course. Ethan taught them how to plant beans, how to loosen soil without hurting worms. The kids laughed, asked 100 questions, and one wrote on her page, "This is where the ground smiles." Later that evening, Ethan read it aloud. "Pretty good review," he said. I nodded. "Best one I've ever had." That summer brought rain more than we needed. Floodwater filled the ditches and soaked half the rows. We lost some crops. Ethan was crushed. "It's all gone," he said. "Not all," I told him, pointing to the plants still standing. "Some things learn to bend before they break." Be ready. He didn't smile then, but weeks later, when the sun dried the mud and new shoots appeared, he said quietly, "You were right." Maybe he didn't mean the plants. Maybe he meant us. The town built a shed at the edge of the field for tools and donations. People started calling it the sharing barn. Inside were shelves of canned goods, gloves, and a sign, "Leave what you can, take what you need." Sometimes I'd walk in and just stand there, surrounded by the sound of things moving quietly, bags rustling, jars clinking, generosity breathing. We didn't keep records or totals. We didn't need to. The proof was in the faces of people who came empty and left a little lighter. Ethan started a small group for local teens, the Green Crew, he called it. Every weekend, they helped with planting and learned carpentry from Tom. One day, a boy who never talked much handed Ethan a drawing of the farmhouse with sunlight spilling through the windows. He'd written under it, "This is what hope looks like." We framed it and hung it in the kitchen. Every time I looked at it, I felt the same quiet ache, the good kind, the kind that reminds you you're part of something worth keeping alive. Years ago, I used to think wealth meant having enough not to worry. Now I know it's the opposite. Real wealth is having something you can give away and still feel full. We weren't rich, but we had plenty, too much of the good kind of plenty. And when the sun set over Hopefield, the light stretching gold across the soil, I'd whisper, "Thank you." not to anyone in particular, just to life, for letting us stay long enough to build something that mattered. That fall, I got a letter. It was from the Hayes family's granddaughter. She'd seen the newspaper article and wanted to visit the place her grandfather lost. When she arrived, she stood at the gate for a long time, silent. Finally, she said, "He would have loved this." Then she handed me a folded deed. "It's yours," she said. "You've done more for this land than anyone ever did." I couldn't speak. All I could do was hug her and hope she understood how much that paper meant. That night, Ethan and I walked through the garden by lantern light. We stopped at the gate where the old sign still read Hopefield. "Dad," he said, "think this will last forever?" "Forever's a long time," I said. "But if we take care of it, maybe it'll outlast us." He smiled. Then we did all right. I looked over the rose green, gold, alive, and felt something settle in my chest. We hadn't just found home. We'd build a world that could keep growing without us. And that, I think, is what forever really means. It's been 10 years since Ethan and I first saw the old farmhouse on that forgotten road. The paint has faded again, but this time from sun, not neglect. Hopefield, as the town still calls it, hums with life. Every morning bees drifting above the lavender rows, laughter from the volunteers who show up before I finish my first cup of coffee. Sometimes I sit on the porch and watch them work. There's a rhythm to it, like breathing. We used to fight for every inch of ground, and now the earth gives back freely. It's strange how generosity multiplies when shared. Ethan lives in town now, close enough to visit every day, but far enough to have his own life. He teaches agricultural science at the high school, the same one that used to send kids here for field trips. His students call him Mr. Green because his hands are always stained from soil. When he talks about sustainability, he starts every lesson the same way. My dad and I learned this the hard way. Then he shows them pictures of the first year, the cracked dirt, the cardboard windows, the tiny green shoots. Proof that starting small still counts. The farmhouse has changed too. The barn became a workshop, the kitchen turned into a gathering hall, and the field behind it, once just rows of beans and potatoes, is now divided into small plots people can rent or share. The sign by the gate reads, "Hopefield Community Farm, where everyone grows." It still surprises me how true that is. Some people come for food, others for peace. Some just need something to care for. I've learned that the soil doesn't ask who you are. It just takes what you give it and returns it, slowly, quietly, faithfully. On most mornings, I walk the rows before the volunteers arrive. My knees creak, my back protests, but I move slow enough to notice things. The way dew collects on cabbage leaves, the scent of rain hiding in the wind, the tiny footprints of rabbits that always find their way back, no matter how many fences we fix. It's a ritual, I suppose, a kind of prayer. Not the kind you say out loud, but the kind that happens when gratitude hums louder than words. I whisper, "Thank you," into the air, and somehow it feels like enough. Sometimes new visitors ask me how it all started. They expect a speech, a grand plan, maybe some miracle. I always tell them the truth. We were just trying to survive. That's all it was. A man and his boy planting something because they had nothing left to lose. What happened after was never strategy. It was people noticing kindness and adding their own. I watch their faces when I say that. Some smile, some look away, but most nod slowly. Because deep down, everyone's looking for proof that small beginnings still matter. There's a small wall in the house covered with photos and notes. Some are from strangers we fed, others from volunteers who moved away but wanted to leave a piece of themselves here. One note, written on the back of a seed packet, says, "You gave me my first reason to get up in the morning." Another, from a single mom, reads, "My kids think vegetables come from miracles now. I leave them all there. They remind me that you don't measure success in acres or yield, you measure it in stories, and this place is full of them." The local paper still checks in every year. Last spring, they ran a story titled "The Field That Fed a Town." I didn't read it right away. I've never liked seeing my name in print, but Ethan clipped it and taped it above the sink anyway. "It's not about you," he said. "It's about what you started." Maybe he's right. I used to think the garden saved me. Now I know it just gave me the tools to save myself and the patience to wait while others learned to do the same. Not every year was easy. Droughts still come. Fences still break. One summer, a storm tore through and flattened half the corn. We stood in the wreckage, mud up to our knees, watching the sky clear like it hadn't done anything wrong. "Start over?" Ethan asked. "Always," I said, "because the only real failure is not trying again." We replanted what we could, fixed what we couldn't, and somehow the yield was smaller but sweeter. That's the secret of struggle. It makes the harvest taste better. The town holds a festival here now every fall. They call it Harvest of Hands. The name came from a little girl who said, "So many hands made this food, it's like all of them are in it." She was right. People bring pies, music, old recipes, and stories that stretch across generations. I sit near the edge of the crowd, sipping cider, watching families dance between the rows. The farmhouse glows behind them, strings of lights swaying in the wind. For a moment, I swear the land itself hums a low, content sound, like a sigh after a long, full meal. Tom still visits, though his knees don't let him till anymore. He mostly sits on the porch with me, giving advice no one asks for and everyone still listens to. "You ever think about selling this place?" he asked once, half teasing. I shook my head. "You can't sell a heartbeat." He laughed so hard he coughed. "Then make sure it keeps beating," he said. I promised I would. But I think even if I didn't, someone else would. Hopefield doesn't belong to me anymore. It belongs to everyone who believes in second chances. Carol passed a few winters back. The bakery still delivers bread to the farm every week. Her granddaughter runs it now, says it's tradition. The first time she came, she looked around and said, "Grandma used to say this place made the air taste sweeter." I told her I believed it, because sometimes when the wind carries the smell of fresh bread across the field, I feel Carol there laughing, bossing us around, handing out sandwiches with more love than ingredients. People like her never really leave. They just change shape. Ethan's been talking about building a greenhouse for year-round crops. He says it'll let us grow food through winter and teach more kids how to plant. I told him to go for it. "You don't need my permission," I said. He grinned. "I do. You're still the boss." I laughed. "Son, the dirt's the boss. We just follow its rules." He plans to name it the Hope House. I like that. A new chapter, same story. Every generation deserves its own way of keeping the light alive. We get visitors from other towns now, even a few from the city. They come asking how to start something similar. I give them the same advice I gave Ethan when we first planted. Start with what you have, then give it away. They usually blink, thinking it's some kind of riddle. But that's the whole truth. Generosity is the best fertilizer I know. It keeps soil rich, hearts soft, and roots strong. You can't hoard life. It's meant to circulate, like rain. Every now and then, I still dream about that first day, the car breaking down, the weeds taller than our shoulders, Ethan's voice saying, "Maybe it's ours." In the dream, I see the house just as it was, gray, quiet, lonely. Then I blink, and it's now painted, alive, filled with people and laughter. The two versions overlap for a moment, like the land remembers both the pain and the promise. I wake up grateful every time, because some miracles don't erase the past, they rewrite it into something worth remembering. The town council wants to install a plaque at the front gate. I try to argue against it, but they insisted. It says, "In memory of those who believed that growing food could also grow hope." Founded by Sam and Ethan Harlan, 2025. When they unveiled it, I couldn't speak. My hands trembled too much. Ethan just put his arm around me and whispered, "We did good, Dad." And maybe for the first time in my life, I believed him completely. Not because of what we'd built, but because of what it built in us. Hopefield has become part of the town's heartbeat. When someone loses their job, they come here to help until they find their footing. When a family can't afford groceries, they pick from the field. When kids need a summer project, they join Ethan's crew. It's strange, watching the place that once saved me, now saving others. Sometimes I stand at the fence and just listen to the hum of it, all voices, laughter, wind in the crops. It sounds like gratitude. It sounds like home. Age has slowed me down. I can't work the soil like I used to. My hands ache when it rains, and I take more breaks than I'd like to admit. But the land doesn't mind. It's patient with me, the way I once tried to be with it. On quiet afternoons, I sit in the shade of the oak tree and watch new faces bending over the rows. Some I know, some I don't. It doesn't matter. The harvest is theirs now. The lesson, too. Nothing truly grows unless it's shared. Last month, a young couple came by with a newborn. They said they met here years ago, volunteering during a summer break. "We wanted her first photo to be here," the mother said, placing the baby among the sunflowers. The baby cooed, reaching for a petal, and everyone laughed. Later, Ethan told me, "That's the next generation of gardeners." I nodded. Yeah, the roots just keep going deeper. Watching that little hand grasp sunlight made me realize this place isn't about what we built. It's about what will keep building itself after we're gone. Some evenings, I sit on the porch with a cup of tea, the sunset stretching long shadows across the field. The sign still creaks a little in the wind. Hopefield. Every time I see it, I think of Ethan at 12, painting that first shaky word on a scrap of wood. He thought it was just a name, but now I see it was a prophecy. We planted hope, and hope kept planting us back. That's the thing about good soil. It grows what you give it, even after you've stopped tending. If you ever drive past the old county road and see a small farmhouse wrapped in green fields, stop for a minute. Walk through the gate. Touch the soil. You'll feel it what hundreds of hands have left behind. Laughter, sweat, second chances. Tell the volunteers hello, pick a tomato, maybe leave a note on the kitchen wall. And if you see me sitting on the porch, don't thank me. Just tell me what you're growing, because that's what this place was always about. Not what we planted back then, but what still blooms today. The seeds never stopped growing.